Some of you were in the workshop over the weekend, so I'm Michael Dudash. You can throw the C on the front if you want. And glad to meet all of you. And Thomas Blackshear is here tonight as well. He's doing a guest appearance. And
look at your painting. You see what color? How it looks on that paint?
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
That shows you what it will look like in a different scheme.
Yeah.
Oh, on the monitor.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we've got, a good 3 hours here tonight, and when it gets to be 10, if you got to go, obviously you can go, but I'll go till 10:20 now, because that's pretty much what we're at in terms of starting. So I want you to get your money's worth and your time's worth out of this, unless the school kicks us out. Boy, there's a lot we could talk about, a lot we could cover. In putting this together, I know that in talking to some of the people over the weekend, some of them were interested in having me work on completing this painting, and also there were still some who were interested in landscape stuff that I do, and even maybe redoing the portraits. So that kind of leaves us with a dilemma, because what are we going to do in 3 hours? This is about 2 hours worth of work, and I could probably cover the rest of the painting in 45 minutes or something like that. And I know that some of you are also interested, if you've seen my work, how I might do some of the landscape effects, fill in a bit, and you all know who he is. Everybody know who Thomas is, And I've been an illustrator for almost 20 years as a freelancer, and everything I do is oil paint. And along the wall are various samples of sketches for various jobs and some finishes, and there's a couple of portfolios floating around that show you some of the other kinds of work that I've done over these years. And it's great being here. The school, it's a fantastic place, and I'm just kind of in awe of a lot of the work I see up on the walls that everybody's doing with the figurative work, and so it's great to have you all here. We really appreciate it. I don't think we're going to even take time tonight going around dealing with your names and everything, because I'll never remember anyway, so let's not waste time with that. And it's not that I'm not interested.
3 hour demo, you want to
yeah, so we'll have to pass on that. And I think that before I get actually to even putting on any color or actually doing any artwork, I need to talk for a few minutes about the philosophy of what it is that I do. As an artist first, and a painter and a drawer first, and an illustrator second, and the reason I bring that to you is that's the way I view what it is that I do. I think it's important to keep that in perspective. I didn't go into the illustration business to make a living so that eventually I could pay my way to become an artist. And that's an important distinction as far as I'm concerned. I think all the great illustrators are artists, and great artists first. And so if you're here tonight to learn about that aspect of what it is I do, the illustration part, I think I want to make that clear to you, that if any of you are illustrators or have ambitions of heading into that field, make sure you're a good artist first. And I hope you're here tonight because you're interested in oil painting and figurative work, and since I'm going to be working in oil, I'll be showing you some various kinds of oil painting techniques and the way I sort of approach dealing with color and laying on of oil. So that's really what we're focusing on tonight. We'll also talk a little bit, and Thomas can get in here and talk too about a little bit of the philosophy of this and also the business end of it if you're interested. Let me ask you this first. How many in here would be interested later on, trying to set aside a little bit of time to ask questions or talk about illustration as a business or a career? Nobody's that interested. That's fine. The limited edition print business? Okay. I mean, I can touch on that some. I have some experience in that. I've got half a dozen prints I've done. Frankly, Thomas, too, is one he's really another level with that, dealing with Greenwich, and, he's really more involved in a company on a full-time basis, being Greenwich Workshop, and he's done a couple of his own prints that he's marketing himself, but he'd be a great one to talk about that if he's willing.
Sure, of course, whatever.
And so there's that. I'm still a little bit more involved in dealing with weekly assignments and dealing with various aspects of the illustration business. So there's not that much interest in that here tonight. So we'll sort of. You have a little bit back there.
A little bit of interest, but I'm not going to the class.
Okay, all right.
Well, the point of the matter is, depending on what you want to learn, I mean, while he's up there doing certain things, if you got a question, we could be talking all the while.
Sure.
He's concentrating and stuff, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that Thomas is here. You know, when this was sort of put together, I just offered my services several months ago when I knew I would be out here from Vermont, which is where I live, to do the workshop. So I said, as long as I'm in town, I'm on Monday free, but Monday night I'll be glad to teach. So this was kind of thrown together at the last minute, and since I didn't know if Thomas would be here or not, and it turns out he's in town and available, so it's really terrific he came along. Because he and I are tremendous admirers of each other's work. You know, I'm humbled in front of him, and he tells me he's humbled in front of me. So, you know,
That's why I would not follow up if you were
Yeah.
with another different thing.
we're part of the Mutual Admiration Society here. All right. So that being said, I've always loved oil. My favorite painters throughout my whole life have always been oil painters. It's not that there aren't great painters and illustrators who work in other mediums. I just said, what is it about my very, very favorite people that I like? And I've always tried to learn from them and emulate them. And most of them were really oil painters. And I said they could do all different kinds of styles and all different kinds of techniques. It looked like oil painting had the widest variety of flexibility. And so I stuck to it starting 18, 19 years ago. I started working directly with oil, and I've stuck to it. So some of the stuff I do or talk about is sort of second nature to me, and I have to always backtrack and remind myself that even if I make sometimes oil painting look a little bit easier, it's a difficult medium to work with. How many have had experience with oil paint in the room? Pretty much everybody? No? Larry, you haven't? Okay.
No,
And
unfortunately.
Leonard, you haven't either so much. Okay. Well, when you talk about painting and drawing, a lot of the compositional techniques, or information, the color information, the value information, all of those things cut across all mediums, and you all know that. I don't care. A lot of what I can show you tonight, you can emulate or work with colored pencil or pastels, acrylic, gouache, anything, you know. Because a lot of things I'm going to talk about, which are up in here, transcend whatever the medium is you're working with. It transcends the materials that you've got. And a lot of people, when they look, especially my illustrations, they get a feeling there's a lot of tricky techniques and stuff. And frankly, there really isn't. I generally will see a piece of art almost finished, or I try to as best as I can in my head, or I like a particular kind of look, and I labor toward that look. And my materials sort of have to fall in line with what I want. I don't let the materials direct what it is that I want to do as an artist. I'm in control of the materials. So if I want to do a soft, very soft, gentle, airy painting, well, that's my paint's going to take me in that direction. Oil paint can do that. If I want to do something that's hard-edged and a lot of punch and a lot of heavy-duty drama, bright colors, I'll take the paint and shove it in that direction. And so I have to make some decisions before I even get started with a particular piece of art as to where I want to end up. And so then everything else falls in line. It's having that goal or that particular plan in mind. And all good artists will do that. Once I have that plan or that goal I'm trying to attain, in the process I allow accidents to happen. I can work with the medium because I'm familiar with it enough to let certain things go on and off, and I know how to control it, but sometimes I let funny things or accidents happen. But full well all knowing, and in the back of my mind, is that I work toward a particular finish. Another way I sort of approach artwork, and I'll talk about this a little bit as I'm painting in terms of shapes and composition, is I've always broken it down, artwork, and I did this early on without knowing it, but now I understand why I was doing it, into simple, very simple shapes, and a lot of overlapping shapes, and a lot of silhouettes. And I discovered that it was easy for me to start a painting initially, to paint out sort of silhouettes or simple sort of shapes, and then if I wanted to go back and add halftones on top of this paint, I would do that later. But I had to mentally figure out a little, if I have any kind of a formula, it might be that, is that I break the artwork down into sort of simple areas of design and simple areas of shape, overlapping shapes. And when I get going on a painting or a piece of art, I try to keep it in very, very simple, understandable patterns that tend to sort of overlap. Now, an example of that might be a square here that intersects and overlaps this particular line in such a fashion that it's a pleasing intersection. It's not going to have a lot of what we call tangents, where you have, in the foreground you got a person's head, and in the background I want to put a tree, and I'll put a tree right here like that, and it immediately causes confusion of, well, which is in the foreground, which is in the background. That's a basic concept. I don't want to belabor that. You're better off putting the tree behind the person like so, And so you take this simple principle, and as the painting gets more complex, and as you look at you dividing the painting into smaller and smaller sorts of areas, you're always thinking in terms of overlapping shapes. You're thinking of how they interact with each other. And even with small brush strokes, you begin to think in terms of little patterns and how they relate and overlap with one another. And so on a simple scale, you'll take a drawing and you break it down into some very, simple kinds of things. And if the painting works or the illustration is going to work at a very small level, the composition works, it's worked out, it's balanced, that's great. But as the painting gets bigger and you get into more and more detail, you're sort of replicating, or that philosophy is being done over and over and over and over and over again in a painting. The way you have your little shapes relate, all the way down to a brush stroke. It's going to be small and it's going to be replicated at a medium size, and as it grows larger, until the whole painting is really basic, very basic, simple shapes. Do you all kind of understand that? That's a little ethereal, but it's the best sort of way I can explain it. I'm not, I'm better at just sort of painting it, and since I'm an artist, not an English major, I have a hard time describing that. My favorite painters would do that. You look there, you get right down, look at their brushwork, and they had these great little things going on. And as you got back and the painting got bigger, they had the same kind of relationships with patterns and shapes of color, light and dark. All the way until you get to the size of the whole painting. And one other thing, since I'm going to do a couple of things tonight, one is which is work on this painting a little bit more, and the other, which I might do a very quick head study, or let me show you briefly as an illustrator how I might organize a job. And this is a general sort of rule. In this case, she's a friend of mine, Rosemary Von Trapp, and I had taken some slides of her a while ago, and I've used her in a couple of paintings before. She's a real character, so I thought she'd make a good demo. And I had once I figured out which figure I wanted to work with and which head I wanted to work with, I had these enlargements made. And I pieced them together, first of all, at a very small size. This is like a little thumbnail. I oftentimes do this with drawing. You just draw it out. But in this case, and lots of times with illustration, especially when I need tight likenesses, I'm doing a movie poster, it's got to be dead on, or I'm real concerned about that. I just took these little Xerox copies. I put one head on a body, cut it out, and I found a piece of reference. I don't know where it is now, of a window and some branches and flowers that I wanted to use as a background. And I just fooled around with it till I sort of got a basic, simple little shape. That I sort of liked the balance of it. It's just like a little quick paste-up study. And I do this a lot because in the illustration business, people are sending me reference and scrap all the time that I've got to work with. And a copier, for me, I blow things up and shrink them down. It's turned into a great tool to organize various kinds of visual information. And I could do it. I could sit down and draw it, and I used to, or I still do sometimes. But this is a little tool that I use. And it's very quick and very flexible. And in the business I'm in, when I'm knocking out a job a week or so, speed can really certainly be the essence. You learn where to cut corners where you can, and you learn not to cut corners where you're going to really hurt the job. There's certain things you have to learn where to, hey, well, I can do this really quickly because it doesn't matter, but over here, I better get it right at this stage, at the layout stage, the thumbnail stage, or I'm in trouble later. So in this particular case, this is what I started with. Then I took it upon myself to, sometimes I won't go any farther than this in terms of my reference. I'll just put these on the wall and go at it. In this case, I put together a larger version just so you could see it in the classroom. It's the same kind of thing. And the other thing that I like about doing black and white study or using a copier is it eliminates a lot of the visual junk, simplifies the whole image into basic patterns and shapes, like this whole area down here, which is all there's a lot of the details gone. And my intention in finishing this painting is to take a lot of this area down here and paint it a sort of a roughly flat area and pick out some minor bits of detail all through here, and I'll be doing that later. And also lessening the value kind of as it grows down here. My intention in this particular painting, I wanted to go to the portrait part of this painting, so the highest amount of contrast and probably ultimately the greatest amount of color maybe will be centered on this part of the painting. And this I'm just using as a visual element, as sort of a foundation or base for the painting. And I'm not going to be real concerned with noodling every little nut piece in the guitar. You know, when I see this finished, I see that I can do some nice things with a pattern in her skirt where the light just is cutting across. But you know, I'll do the hand and the skirt, and the rest of this is just I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, much like I did when I quickly roughed in these windows. So that's sort of a basic, brief, 5-minute talk about how I would approach doing an illustration or a particular painting. At this point, we have any questions you'd like to ask me before we start throwing paint around here? Larry?
Yeah, basically from the conceptual stages until the finished work, how long does it generally take?
Well, there is no answer to that. I mean, some jobs they're very, very, very complex. I'll work on for a few weeks. Other ones I'll knock out in a day or two. I mean, I'll do a painting like Gustav Mahler over here. I mean, I'll do that in a day. It's just a portrait. So you're, they'll send me the reference. Like in a particular case like this. They sent me reference material. I took some liberties. See, I sort of had some fun with, these little designy shapes down here. I monkeyed around them. I prepared the board quickly. This is on a double-weight illustration board. Did a drawing for the head. Spray fixed the pencil drawing. I built up the surface with modeling paste and also an acrylic polymer medium, like a Liquitex matte medium or matte varnish, which gives you all these little brush strokes. So at that point, I had something that looked like a black and white drawing on a white board with all these sort of subliminal little textures in white that I created with modeling paste and with Liquitex matte medium. And then I just went at it. I just painted the thing. And, while I was halfway through it, I just, let me try something a little different. So I kind of like nuked this right half of him and sort of liked it, so I left it. It was just kind of having some fun, and the client liked it.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Did any of the modeling paste stuff, did that show through when it was printed?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah. I have in my portfolios, there is a CD or cassette cover, CD cover that this was used on. If you look closely, it's there. And part of that depends on how you light the piece. If you cross light it, it'll show up more. If you flat light it, it'll be
Remind
diminished.
them to light it carefully.
Yeah. So,
is it a pull-off?
You mean the technique pull-off? In this particular case, there was a lot of pull-off, probably more than not. There's very little heavier or opaque paint.
Yeah, it kind of looks like.
Yeah. And I still do this. I think lately in the last year or two, there have been paintings I've done 4, 5, 6 years ago that had a lot of paint on it, but I think consistently now I'm trying to get it more into direct brushwork and more back to traditional oil painting approach. It just seems to be I'm just having more fun with that. I'm kind of tired of this whole thing, and I'm interested more in what the final paintings look like, if they're going to hang on a wall or in a gallery, or even for myself. I find I like paintings that have more paint and impact and actual brushwork and texture. I just feel much better about those kinds of paintings. So I can achieve a lot of this with opaque at this point if I want to. So I don't stick to a particular formula.
Michael, without the surface, do you think that this would have come out different? Was it different surface? Was it just a flat surface? Or
I
did you
think
do
so.
it to please yourself? Or?
Well, no, I think it shows through enough that it does matter. If you look closely at the reproduction, there's some nice things going on there. They're very subtle, but they're nice. That it wouldn't have been there if I'd used a hot press, perfectly smooth surface. And for some kinds of illustration, that's what you want. But I've always been interested in textures and if it's a linen texture, you know, various other kinds of textures within a particular painting. So,
Do you do a color comp to know where you're going with the color direction on?
not much anymore.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's not that I don't get myself in trouble, but years ago I used to do a lot more of them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But lots of times I just don't even have time. Or I don't want to take the time. If I'm going to do a painting this big, like a big one-sheet movie poster type job, and I'll do like a 30 by 44-inch painting or something, I'll definitely have to. If I can't totally visualize where I'm going, I will do color sketches, and sometimes the clients want color sketches. So I'll do a little rough thumbnails.
The interesting thing about Mike's technique is a lot of times as illustrators, when we see what he does, and then we want to go ahead and try to duplicate what we see. The problem is sometimes that we forget that the technique is basically relatively simple. I mean, what we tend to do is when we look at photographs, we want to put every pore and every hair that we see in the illustration because we know it's there. Or if there's a shadow there, we want to go in there and structure out that form when it's not necessary. Basically what we see when we look at his stuff is he eliminates all of that stuff. And where we run into trouble a lot of times is we're sitting there and we're trying to put every little thing we see in the photograph. And that's what's so nice about his technique, because basically all he does is follows the photograph. Once he follows that photograph, it eliminates, just like he said in the Xerox, a lot of details. So all he has to do is follow that form and don't worry about that other stuff, because the more simplified it is, the better it looks. And until we get used to seeing that in our own stuff, a lot of times we're going to cause ourselves a lot more work than we really have to. That's why I was so excited to see him do his demonstration, because it's so doggone simple. And it's like I even work more than I have to. And it's like I know this stuff. It's just that because I've been in the rut of doing what I do for so long, I forgot, you know, how easy it was. And looking at it, just saying, why do I keep working so hard? I mean, all I gotta do. So that's just something to think about when you're trying to do something like what he does, because everything is really spelled out for you in the photograph and in the Xerox. I got it.
Thank you.
Oh, we see. You ran off mid-sentence again? That's awesome. So you're driving down the road and, yeah? And he's just went off, you know? Yeah.
When you apply the materials you're going to use for texturing or whatever, like on the model portrait,
Yeah.
you just kind of put it on haphazardly, make an effort to go with the shapes?
It's both. It's both. And it brings to mind like another principle that a lot of illustrators do, or something I've always I don't know where I heard it. You know, just many years ago, is that at every stage of a piece of artwork, you want to have it look like it's almost finished for what it is. Like if you're going to do a drawing and work with a drawing, it's nice to have, even if it's just a loose drawing, just a few strokes. You want to have it so, hey, I like that. There's something about that stands all on its own. And then you spray fix it or you do whatever. Then you do another layer on top of it. And by the time you get the painting to the next stage, you say, well, I'm ready to quit for a while. Does it look like, hey, there's some really great stuff happening there? You know, I never feel comfortable walking away from a piece of art that's in the middle of being produced that doesn't look great, has something great about it. So when I walk into the studio the next afternoon or an hour later or the next day, I can say, hey, yeah, there's some great stuff going on there. So each layer and the other thing is that you're building one great layer upon another. Now some of it disappears, and you know, you can't see what you might do a fabulous drawing. By the time you get the painting done, is there really a drawing in there? You don't know. But it's an accumulation of layers of great stuff. And so if I have one layer in there that really, you know, plain English sucks, you know, then I'm fighting with it the next layer, you know, and only you can decide that as an artist what turns you on and what doesn't, or if you're happy with it or not. So I think that I don't know what brought this up, but
That's about the texture.
Yeah, oh, that's what it is.
But
So,
you're saying-
so if I put texture down, I want to know, I've got to know, and I've worked at this stuff enough to know, now what's the reaction going to be 2 or 3 layers down the road, or when this thing becomes finished. Now, is the texture I'm putting down now going to really add to the piece, or is it going to be something I've got to fight against later on? And so you tend to sort of make those decisions through experience, what works and what doesn't for you, you know. And I like to have this sort of underlying subliminal layers of stuff kind of happening. And I do that sometimes with texture, or sometimes with a drawing, or sometimes with an underpainting. You know, I like to have these currents, undercurrents running through, very subtle sometimes, the piece of art that for me add interest to the piece and add a little bit of mystery to it. And you look at something real close, you say, hey, well, there's that feeling of this thing going, interacting behind this, or there's this stuff. How did you do that, or why does that happen? You know, it's just very subtle. And sometimes I make it a little bit more obvious, but you know, it's almost like the texture on Gustav Mahler there. There's some subtle things going on in there that you don't really notice, but if you took them out, I think it would detract from maybe the interest of this piece. It could have been a very boring portrait. You know, they sent me this black and white photograph. There was nothing all that exciting about it. It's just a boring photograph. If I had been locked into rendering that photographically, why hire me, you know? So I try to at least take something boring and impart some energy and some changes and some design or some whatever it is I want to do as an artist. So some of my best paintings are from terrible reference. You know, I get these terrible pieces of reference, or, you know, I remember I went down to Florida years ago and I took a bunch of pictures of the Boca Raton Resort and Club. This is my second time there, and it was a gray, terrible day. All the photographs I took were just terrible. They were all washed out, and just, I got home, I said, man, I went through all that and I got this junk. And I was forced to take that junk and make a really beautiful landscape. And so I just kind of used it for detail, but other than that, I disregarded all the lighting and the drama and the colors, and I just made it all up. And in the end, it was almost much more successful than if I'd taken a fairly decent photograph and sort of felt like I was locked into copying this photograph. So
Another thing it does too is it gets back to what we talked about in the class about how crossing the bridge between commercial art and fine art. When you put stuff like that on it, it puts it on a different level. It makes it such that it's not just an illustration, it's a piece that you probably want to hang on your wall for whatever reason.
yeah, I'm just, whenever he talks, I'm
So
going
you,
to draw it. Okay.
so you're saying basically then that
Stack up.
at each stage that you get to on a painting, it could be basically ready for hanging. So
In a way, I mean, if you look around the school, and it's not in here, but I know in the other room we were working in, I kept looking at this one. It was like a brown tone. It was a sketch of a model, but it was in one tone, and it looked like a quick understudy in paint. And it had some really nice, I mean, it was rough in places, really rough, but other places they had, and you know, you could see there's some little drawing brush-like things. I don't know who did it. It was
a pullout.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it was or not. It was in this other room over here, and I kept looking at it and said, man, that's nice, you know? Really nice, just like it. And so I enjoyed looking at it just as it was. It might have been something somebody did in a half an hour of just roughing out some shapes. And it's what I'm talking about, you know. A drawing is a drawing. It's a drawing. It's what it is. It's not trying to be a painting. So that drawing, if you're going to do it, make it a nice drawing. You know, make it a drawing that at least has something you feel good about. It'll inspire you to go back and work on it some more, and once again, it'll add some attributes to the final piece that will show through depending upon the kind of technique you use. So, depending upon how you work and how you approach painting and creating artwork, those things are important to me at least. And I think traditionally you'll find that as you look toward the masters, the painters and stuff. You know, they would, and I know like Rockwell definitely relied on that. He talks about that. You know. So it's that's just some of the things I kind of hang on to. Okay. Why don't I get to painting here, and what I think I want to do is work on some of this a little bit and get going, and then I'll take like a few-minute break, maybe finish doing a little bit of drawing on this, spray fix it. Maybe Thomas, at that point you can talk a little bit or whatever. Maybe in a little while, and then I'll come back and try to finish the night with a quick portrait study, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, this is where I guess I know some of you wanted to see me work on this, Thomas, you and some other people wanted to see me do some a little bit of a landscape kind of thing. So, I mean, I could paint a landscape on the guitar.
Save some time.
And then when I get home, I'll scrub it out. No,
You at least get to some of the lay-in and stage 1 or 2 or something like that.
you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to work on just a couple of areas here, and I'll show you who missed it the other day, and I can work with this a little bit more. How I might work with some leaves and sort of my approach I quickly take. And really, it's the same thing for a landscape. And then I want to scrub all this in and see where that takes us. So I just use a normal variety of paints. It looks like most of them are still out here. Just make sure. It's black in there.
You always have the same palette, or you put the colors out according to the...
No, I pretty much use the same. I mean, it depends. I mean, if I'm just going to do some sort of underpainting with a limited palette, I just won't squeeze all this paint out. But I usually use the same. You know, I've got a black and a white, and it's just an ivory or lamp black, a burnt sienna, raw sienna, a couple of different yellows. You know, cadmium yellow light, cadmium yellow medium, or like a scarlet or a cadmium red light, cadmium red dark, or alizarin crimson. I only use generally a couple of blues. I use a Windsor blue, which is like a very hot, a very cool, like a phthalo almost type blue, but it's very intense. A lot of the pigment just spreads forever, you know. And then I use an ultramarine, sometimes a cobalt, and then I really only use one green right out of the two, which is Windsor green. It's like a phthalo green, because I find with that I can mix, and the other colors I've got out, I can mix tons of different greens, and I keep it simple. So the painting medium I use is something called liquid, and I put sometimes, in this case, a little bit more. I put a little bit of Japanese dryer in it, or a cobalt dryer. That sort of darkens it a little bit here. And liquid's Liquin, I believe. Winsor Newton makes it.
It sets up pretty fast.
Yeah, it sets up pretty fast all by itself. If you really want it to set up fast, it's like I do sometimes as an illustrator. I actually put a pinch of dryer in it. I mean, I did this painting on Saturday. Was it Saturday?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we got done around noon. And certainly by the next morning, I came in and checked it out, and it was dry. You know. And I had a couple places here where there's a fair amount of paint on there, you know. So, I'm actually at a point with this now. I can show you a couple of landscape techniques that I probably couldn't have quite done if it's dry, which is some of these very soft auras. You see, like maybe in some of these things. I don't use an airbrush for anything. I use bristle brushes for the most part, with a couple of very soft blending brushes are important to get some of the effects I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the bristle fantails that are stiff bristle fan. They won't do it for you. You know, you need like a soft. I mean, if you feel like the end of that guy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is like you want to put rouge on, you know. You know how soft that is.
Makeup
You
brushes.
can pass that around. Yeah, I mean that's. And this one's a hair, a little bit stiffer. These are nice. Winsor Newton makes these. I don't even know what they're called, but you can get them a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, and they're very soft. And they last quite a while if you keep them clean with oil paint. Eventually, a turpentine will eat them up, but these will last for months.
You use mostly flats,
Yeah, I use flats, sometimes a filbert.
filberts.
Yeah, which is a little bit of a longer bristle. I've been trying some of those lately and having some fun
Yeah.
with those. And for landscape painting, the flats, you know what a flat brush is? It's more of a square. It's a shorter bristle, but it's squarish. You buy the brush and it looks like, let me see here if I've got one relatively new one. That's called a bright.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's a bright. It's shaped about like that. And sometimes they're even a little shorter, depending on the brand. You get them squarish. A filbert's the same shape, it's just longer. It's maybe 30-40% longer.
Filbert's a little rounded.
And a little bit rounded. Yeah, I've got. It's going to look more like that.
As in the nut.
Yeah, it's going to look more like that. And what happens is you wear down the Well, this is an example of a bigger one. You wear down the brights, and they start to get a kind of a tip on them, like a point.
Like a filter.
Looks like a film.
A little bit.
They turn into filters.
Yeah. But what I discovered with those is that you can load these up with paint, and you can paint dots.
It's up in the base.
Well, you can paint dots, and for small trees and little details, it's amazing the detail you can do with a big fat brush.
Yeah, it was amazing to see that you have no small brushing, and yet it seemed like you have a lot of detail.
Well, and occasionally I'll go in with a small triple-aught sable for little tiny. I don't think I did on any of these. No, not at all. But
Why do you use a big brush to put small round shapes in instead of a small brush?
Well, partly I'm just too lazy to change brushes. And the other thing is it's just much quicker.
Because you can, right?
Yeah, because I can. I don't know if there's any real rhyme or reason. I mean, it's like, and also there's something about when you load a lot of paint on a bristle brush, and you go at it, it leaves the paint there when you're working, especially when the oil paint's still a little bit wet. If you're using a soft sable, it's real frustrating because it tends to put some paint down and automatically blend it. When you're working with oil paint, as opposed to a watercolor, when you do a layer, it dries right away, or an acrylic, it dries right away. Then you can put down a soft brush and the paint stays there kind of. But when it's with oil paint and you try to use soft sable brushes and you do little things like this, you can't get enough paint with a sable brush onto the wet board to give it a nice separation. It automatically blends into what's there, and you end up with a messier sort of a look. And then you got to go back and do it again anyway. Is what I discovered. It only half does it. It dries the next day, kind of gets tacky. You got to go back and do it all over again over the top. I do use those if I'm doing little tiny things that are really tight for certain jobs, and I have to do that once in a while. And then I do use very small brushes. But for this kind of stuff, I mean, the smallest brush I use on this whole thing, I don't even know if I used this. I think I was working with even a brush slightly larger than this, to create this. Not that there's a lot of detail, but there's the illusion of some little pieces of detail. Okay, so let me just think of where I'm going to go from here. So I'm going to take this size brush. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to mix. I generally work from dark all the way to light, or sort of a medium dark to a light. Now, sometimes I'll go back over something like this, and if I want to make it black, or real dark, I'll just do that over the top of it. But I'm going to work with a value, these kinds of values right now. And I'm going to scrub a whole area in. And to show you how I get some of these edges, for those of you who missed it the other day, I'm going to show you how I go about doing that. Now, once again, I said that I'm going to start with this kind of a value here. And by the way, I'm going to introduce some very subtle patterns in these windows, and I'm going to take that pattern and I'm going to pull it right into the vest, so that the vest sort of becomes part of the pattern of this illustration. It's just something I'm going to try, as opposed to giving her a separated red vest. I'm just going to try to do something tricky, and see what happens. But right now, what's going through my mind is I'm going to scrub in sort of a dark area and fill all this in, and I'm going to gradually get a little bit lighter near the bottom. It's just, remember I talked about up here is where I want the most contrast, white, light, and darkness, and down here the values between the overall shape and the highlighted areas are going to get to be closer together. It's kind of, I'll show you what I mean as I go along here. So I'm just mixing a lot of medium to start. I'm trying to remember what colors I used to before. I think what I'm going to do is
Here's a try paint medium number 1, which is kind of like liquid.
No, I haven't. Yeah, I know there's probably some great stuff out there that
You might like it. It also doesn't smell.
Yeah, liquid does have a bit of an odor to it.
Was that a stuff? A gambler painting medium number 1. Or same thing.
I'm mixing kind of a neutral. These are going to be low-key, neutral kinds of colors. there's some white mixed into this. These are not transparent colors out of the tube. Go to a grayer color. This green. Let's see. It's a material called gator foam, which I make these boards myself. And onto the gator foam. This is like 5/16. You can buy it. It comes in huge 4x8 sheets. It's very lightweight. It's pretty rugged stuff. It's like a very heavy-duty foam core, and it's 5/16. This is. You can buy it with a white paper backing or brown. And in the bigger paintings, I use 1/2 inch, the bigger stuff. It's called gator foam. And to that, I laminate raw linen. And once the raw linen is attached, it's dried, I gesso it.
Do you do this rabbit skin glue?
No, I don't use any rabbit skin glue. I just use plain old an acrylic gesso and do 3 or 4 coats. And in this particular case, and it's just a graphite drawing, and I use these smudge stumps. They're just rolled up paper. You buy them in any art store. I've used these for years to get sort of halftones. Why don't I show you that before I even go any farther with scrubbing this out? It's the nice thing about oil paint. I can stop even though I just got started. And it doesn't, you know, the phone rings, the kid comes in, and I got to give him some money. So, you know, you can stop. And so on this, the drawing I'll use is sometimes just straight pencils, which gives you sort of this black line, rough line on linen. Halftones can come from, I use a piece of charcoal with a smudge stump. And actually, literally, it's almost like you're putting charcoal on the stump. You know, when you draw with this. It's kind of fun. And in this case, I want the drawing to show through a little bit, particularly up here, down here, I'm not so concerned about it. And all these drawings is just sort of define some shapes, and they do show through a little bit, but I sometimes just ignore them totally, or sometimes I follow them very closely. And that's really it. And then when the drawing is done, it's spray fixed with a Krylon workable fixative. How you doing? Okay, and then when the fixative is, you know, when the drawing is fixed on there, I can paint over this and do whatever I want, and go back and wipe all this off an hour or two later, and the drawing is still there. It hasn't been messed up. So I've secured and preserved the drawing underneath. In this case up here, it's hard to tell from where you're sitting. I did take some modeling paste, Liquitex modeling paste, and quickly, with a palette knife and a very stiff brush, I just fooled around and put some textures in here. And if you look closely later, you can come up and see. You'll see how there's some very subtle buildup of some textures underneath here that tend to show through. And I was just fooling around to try to show you that's one way I do that occasionally with building up textures on the painting. The only reason being is that without a whole lot of work on top of it, you can do a quick, almost a thin painting, and it looks like there's a lot happening there. And it's the modeling paste just sort of serves as something. It's part of my personality that's underneath there that was put on quickly and dried, and it's easier to do it that way in certain cases rather than use oil paint, which takes much longer to dry. Okay. So y'all follow that? Mm-hmm. Okay. I've added a little bit of a warm color to these areas, simply more like this a little, just simply because there is a guitar here. I don't want to have a green guitar. And you know, I can change this later if I want to. adding a little bit of white paint to oil, even though it just gives it a little more body, I find it's a little bit easier to control. Years ago, I just used plain old, thin, transparent, clear oil paint. And I found after at times it was hard to control, and I discovered when I added a little bit of white to it, it gave the paint a little bit of body. It was easier for me to achieve the effects I wanted. So let me just work with this for a minute and see where we go. I don't have a piece of tape here to put this up with, but not that I'm following this anyway. But,
Randall's gone to get.
So what are you thinking about there?
well, I'm trying to think of if I want to introduce a darker value to sort of bring, let's just see what happens, and then I'll tell you what I was thinking. I'm not quite.
You're just trying to cover that shape right now before you decide.
Yeah, I'm trying to introduce just a pinch of this color down here. I want to see if I want to have any of these darkest darks down below the hand, which I do. I'm just trying to figure out what sort of random shape I might want to do that with.
I can see how, when you're not following the exact lines, how it's more inviting to work back into it.
Yeah. Now, I also, at this point, I like to have some fun, and I'm not, I don't know how to describe it other than I'm not painting a woman with a guitar right now. Let's put it that way. I'm just painting shapes of color, and I'm trying to do something that I'm subliminally sort of interested in. I don't know how to describe it. It's just one of those things you just,
Just like we were talking about painting underneath the painting.
Yeah, one of the things we talk about a lot in the workshop this weekend is don't paint or draw sometimes what you
Surface.
yeah, the surface, or what you sort of think it is in a way, or what, like the example I use is it was yours, Mike. If you're painting a sky, you don't have to paint it this perfect smooth blue sky like you sort of think, like a little child would think a sky is blue and they color in a sky,
Yeah.
You're way beyond that. You're making a painting, and what's a painting but a bunch of color, shapes, line, value? It's a very abstract thing you're creating. The subject matter is just sort of the thing you're hinging it on.
Yeah.
So don't lock yourself into sort of what you might commonly think a face or a hand or a background or whatever would be. You're going to have a much more successful painting. You throw that all out the window, and you just try to create a bunch of lines and colors and shapes and values, And it just so happens, because of the way you arrange it, it looks like a person.
At this point right now, what you're basically doing is painting in abstract.
Yeah, that's absolutely. You know what, Thomas? That's absolutely right. I do little abstract paintings to clean my palette off, and they don't look a whole lot different than the first few stages of a painting.
I mean, that's how freeing what you're doing is, because you're not sitting there trying to duplicate a photograph. You're sitting there painting the painting, having fun with shapes and color.
That's right.
And then that's the subliminal stuff. Then you go back later on and you arrange it so that it looks like it's supposed to be something.
That's right. That's right. It's almost like there's underneath a lot of these paintings, there's an abstract painting in there somewhere. And you know, and I allow myself to have some fun. And
See, when I go back home, I'm gonna start having fun.
Somehow people that know the painting know whether you have fun doing it or not. They communicate. It's true.
yeah. Okay, now what I would do at a point like this is I would say to myself, start to say to myself, is I'm making a value decision. This is going to be a decision I'm going to make at this point. Now I'm trying to decide if the overall value of I go back to my very simple shape again. And I could turn this whole thing upside down at this point, the reference and the painting. I can still make the same decisions almost. Okay? And what I'm deciding right now really, once again, has nothing to do with this, with some of the obvious subject matter we're dealing with. I'm dealing with shapes and color, and once again, like I said, if I turn this upside down, and I'm not following the values in here as you can tell, but I should be able to make almost the same decision.
Did you start ahead in the same way? It was dark?
Yeah.
And then
I scrubbed it in darker around here, and then I wiped it out with a towel and brushed it in and did all the shadowy first, and then I went back and painted the facial parts. What I'm trying to decide right now is how dark do I want to make the darkest darks in this painting? And that will determine whether, to a certain point, is this a bright daylight painting, like a plein air painting? Is it going to be more of a dusk where you might have blacker blacks? You know, I'm just going to make some intuitive decisions, or sometimes a real obvious decision. If it's a job and it's a dark, moody, dramatic job, then I'll know that my darkest darks are just pretty much going to be black or almost black. And maybe the whites won't be white. They'll be maybe a little bit darker than a white. So I'm trying to decide right now is, remember I wanted to try something interesting, which is the whole bottom part of this painting, make the darkest darks lighter, much lighter than make the darkest part of this much lighter than the darkest parts of this. It's just something I want to try, and it'll help draw attention to this part of the painting. I don't know if it'll work or not, but it's something I try occasionally, and usually it does. So what I'm saying right now is, do I want to lighten all this up, sort of artificially scrub this out a little bit? Or do I want to leave it about where it is, and maybe in a few places up here, introduce something that's a little bit darker? I'll show you. I'll put this on here, and maybe you can help me decide. I'm talking about dark, dark. The darkest darks you can get are generally going to be black mixed with a little bit of a dark blue. All right, and see, that's pretty much black, right? Pretty darn close to 100% black. You know, do I want to have anywhere in this painting where I'm going to go that dark? If I do, and I introduce some of this up in here, it's going to make this look a lot lighter, right? If I decide that's too dark for this overall painting, I've already got my darkest darks in here, then maybe I might go back and lighten this up. If I had a black swatch of paper, you'd see what I'm talking about. This looks pretty black, but really it's not black. I don't know what it is. Yeah, maybe that's pretty. That's pretty black.
Oh, yeah.
You know? See what I mean?
Keep it soft.
I think I should keep it soft.
Why did you start so dark in there? Because like on your comp, actually...
Well, I don't follow the comp, really. You know, it's... Look at this one. See, it's just the way the copier worked that day. It's running out of toner. You know. So, it's just... You know, I didn't take a lot of time with it. You know, I just...
You want this to be like morning, though, you probably want to keep it darker behind you.
Yeah. And well, another thing I'm thinking of is, once again, I want to paint a couple of very subtle little things going on in here that I haven't done yet that I want to bring down and introduce into the vest. So, right now, No, I'm not gonna put it in there. We'll wipe this. See, it's nice about oil paint. It's gone. You know, so that's one of the nice things about it. It's very flexible. And so what I'm going to do right now, and I can't get to this with a rag, sort of, but I'm just going to. I could do this two ways. I could scrub it out, lighten this whole thing up. I'm going to just start with that anyway. I'm going to go back and put some more paint over this. But I'm going to add these kind of soft. It's like maybe she's sitting in a cloud of mist or something, you know. Okay, now see, I did just wiped it out in a way that I've created a little bit of a very subtle, very soft pattern again, you know. I sort of broke the rag up into a few places, and I intentionally did that in a way to create very soft, sort of maybe a slightly checkered pattern or something, you know. I mean, does it work with the rest of the painting, you know, and that sort of thing. So, and by wiping it out, I see more of the drawing. Do I want to see the drawing that's there? If I don't want to, then I'll just do a similar thing with heavier opaque paint and get rid of the drawing that's under there. Sometimes in the illustrations, you want the drawing. I let the drawing show through. Other times, there's a wastebasket here. There's one way back there. Wastebasket. Actually, yeah, that's pretty clean. If family doesn't mind, I'll keep using her as the garbage man. Garbage
I'll
man.
make those good rim shots.
Okay.
The liaison between the gardens and.
I think in this case I am gonna just paint it a little bit of extra white paint. Once again, this is a gallery or an easel type painting, so I'm interested in having more paint on the canvas. I don't want to exaggerate the linen texture too much, so I'm just going to mix up sort of a lighter version of what we were putting on there.
Oh, okay.
Do it now, then I'll jump up
I'm
here.
sure whatever you should.
Okay.
I'll show you at this time another technique that I use that people wonder how I do it. And how you get these soft atmospheric effects without using an airbrush and all that. Well, I'm putting on pretty wet paint. I'm spreading it out in a sort of a random broken pattern. I have to say, do I like that green color? I don't know if I do. I think I'm going to shift it to a cooler, a bit of a bluer color. It's too much green. What's that?
What are you seeing?
What am I? I'm just. It's kind of just abstract shapes, and I'm just doing an overall kind of an underpainting. I'll show you. I'll show you where we end up. Now this is where you can take like a soft blending brush if I wanted to blend these brush strokes. Stipple it.
Is that your soft brush?
Soft brush.
So that's what you would do with trees.
Well, I'll just pretend. I can sort of do it up here on the edge. Let's just take this shape we've got up here. If we're going to be this color. We can shrubs.
Is that the same kind of effect Bernie Fuchs used?
Well, he doesn't do it in this fashion. He does it, he uses a little bit of opaque paint in places. See how it kind of scrubbed over and there's a ghost of what was underneath it. But anyway, let me show you what I might do to create a tree. Let's say this tree is going to be in the distance. You know how we're in a misty morning and the trees are right over the edge of the hill? You know, let's just call this the start of a tree. And I'll do this kind of small because it'll show you what you can do with little big brushes. And we have the general shape of a tree back here. And my immediate thinking is to turn it into kind of a silhouette that I can work with. Once I have the silhouette, then I can add the middle tones or a lighter tone that would be the body of the tree. And also, let's just add also a little bit of dark. I'll make it a little bit darker. I'll start with it a little bit darker, I think. What I'm going to do over the top is just, I want to add some darker textures. It's not working here yet.
One thing I'm noticing about what you're doing is you're using even though it's with oil, you're using a dry brush technique instead of a lot of turpentine or something to lay it on. It's thick, but it's not so thick that it's causing you problems. You're using it in a way where you're scrubbing it in and it covers it, but it doesn't take over it so that it will get all slick on you or anything like that.
Yeah. All right, let's just say this. What I used to do is I'd pick this out. I mean, I'll try it. This doesn't work as well with the thicker opaque paint I've gone here, but this is what I used to do, and I don't do this much anymore. I use almost all opaque paint these days. Take a bristle brush with a little bit of a point on it. Take some straight turpentine. I don't have a painting maul the rest of my hand here, but you can literally scrub the paint right off. By the way, this yellow color on here was an acrylic wash that I put down here. I used acrylic because it dried quickly for the class. You can use acrylic. I oftentimes do, or generally mostly oil, but I'm just going to see how you can remove. We're just taking the paint off. That's the pick kind of technique. And with these softer brushes, if it gets to be if it's too harsh, you can lightly soften these.
Is that what you did in this painting over here? The Bible?
Yeah. Probably what I did there is I had the darker and I wiped out some of it. And then I introduced that golden yellow color, blended it, introduced more blend, took some out. I just kept working back and forth with it. But if you look close, there's a fair amount of opaque, real opaque paint. You can do the same effect with, I've discovered it's much quicker to do without removing it. And I'll show you how you can do it with opaque paint. So I'm going to mix let's see, get some more white out here. The key to that is the blending brushes you're using.
What is that red item there that you have in your hand?
Well, that's something else I'm going to show you. I used to use this once in a while. This is how I do really small stuff. It's just kind of a little trick if you're doing an illustration on a smoother board. It works much better. You want to do something really tiny? You can put down your oil paint, and it's very wet. Remember, the underpainting is sealed. You can take one of these and wipe paint off. Use it like almost a little etching tool.
What is it?
It's just an eraser pencil. It's a soft type of an eraser. You just cut the end with a blade, or you can.
That's how Michael did some of the wispy hairs around the top of her head. Drew those wispy things.
Look at that. That's something.
And you can see up close, but little tiny dots. this board is pretty rough, so this technique doesn't work as well when you work it sideways. But see, it just, you know, it'll rub the paint right off. It just picks it up.
Is the bottom link facing that board?
Yeah, and there is some down here. You know, it just, if you're on a smooth board, you're doing little tiny things, you want to do a little silhouette, yeah, you come look at it close. These things are pretty neat. I mean, I've used them in certain instances. I don't much anymore, but it's just something I discovered. And an electric eraser works great too. Ding, 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 you know. Let's just say this were sort of our horizon line here. Yeah, it's not working on this board very well. It's too rough. But you get the idea. Now what I'm going to show you is, let's scrub it back out again. I'm going to show you how I would probably, if I'm going to, let's say this is the horizon here, and I'm just going to do a bush, sort of a round bush. Here's how I might go about doing it today. I'm just taking white paint, and we'll give it a.
I'm not familiar with this camera.
I'm going to put in a. Sorry.
This one?
Okay. Okay, I've mixed a. Oh, you want to really try to check this out here, huh?
Focus on the
Want to focus on the end of the brush? There you go. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I mixed sort of a medium, sort of a golden ochre type color.
Wow, it's much better now, the video. A lot better.
We're still in the forest.
That's one of your bright brushes that you're using, or a filter, or just a bristle brush?
It's a bristle brush.
This is better. Pretty cool, even though it's a shadow from a really small tree.
That's how surrealism started, right? Demos in ground. In the middle of a painting, someone does a bush.
Don't give them an idea of painting a watch with them.
So you accustom yourself to seeing things in a very different way. You're not seeing things in a real straightforward way. You're really starting abstract and coming backwards to.
Yeah. Now, this is the size of brush I'm using. And in about, what, 15, 30 seconds I laid that in. It's just, and what we're doing, I'm just sort of envisioning a silhouette. And if this tree were to go over here and I wanted to bring it into the guitar with maybe some more foliage, I'm blocking out. Let me see here. Can't see very well where I'm at. Nice thing about oil, see, I can use the side of the brush and I can soften it and do little half tones real quick. You know, if I want to have a sort of a half tone area. Like that, with the same color. With one brush and the same color, you get like 3 different effects. There's that, and then that. So it's just real easy to control, I've discovered. This is sort of an intermediate color. I'll show you also something that I do. It's a little tough because this paint's a little wet. Take some of the oils out of it. I want to get a little bit more of a dry brush technique. You can put down sort of round dots of color. Like so. And I can take this very, very soft brush. Paint is stiff enough that it's not turning into a mess. See, it starts to just, you can stipple it a little bit. Okay. Continue to blend it.
Yeah, hard, we've all been working. I know. Sure, I could get that same look in about 3 weeks. Sit there rendering.
And then what you can do over the top of this, just going to use a much lighter version of what I just put on there just to show you real quick. You know, it's like a little pinpoints of light coming through. It's got that little soft aura around it, you know.
Yeah.
So, with one brush, you can go from this, with a blending brush, of course. Look at those little tiny white dots you can do with a brush this fat, you know. So I've learned to work with opaque paint and opaque oil paint, where I used to labor over this stuff like crazy myself. Trying to figure out quick ways to do this kind of thing. The nice thing is now that you got this, and then you can quickly go over. Let's just mix another. And you know, you background painters, there's a few of you in here and stuff. Then I'll mix just another. We've got sort of this flat silhouette here. Well, we don't want to have it flat. We want to actually look like there's dimension to it. There's things happening in here. You just mix another color real quickly. We'll make it a little bit of a brighter green in this particular case. The other thing, a nice thing I love about oil paint is the color you mix and the color you put down is what you get. When it dries, it doesn't change. I tried the water-based stuff, drove me nuts. I couldn't get used, years ago, I mean I haven't tried it in years, but I couldn't get used to, I just wasn't used to it. I mean, you can get used to it, I'm sure. I'm going to mix a very subtle, sort of a blue-green here. It's close to what I've got but down. The value is going to be a little bit lighter, and the chroma or the hue, the chroma or the color of this will be a little bit brighter. This isn't exactly what I want, but it's close enough for the demonstration. Let's see. Just a little too blue. See, it's now I'm adding. If I made it a green, let's add some yellow to it, so we get more of a green. I'm not talking a lot about mixing colors, or when how you learn how to mix colors. We can get into some of that if you want to. There's a lot of books and a lot of other things out there that will probably teach you better than myself. Dealing with complements and various shades and values. I tend to keep things pretty simple at this stage, particularly in a painting. I don't use a whole lot of colors. And if I do on this, I mix them back toward each other.
It's almost like you're turning her, what she's holding, into a basket of flowers.
Yeah, I haven't even bothered. I'm not looking. I'll probably wipe all this out in a minute. And it's much easier to go from dark to light when it comes to landscapes and foliage. and I can still go back and introduce a darker color. We were talking about this in the workshop, that it's much harder. Can you imagine how long it would take me if I tried to paint around that yellow? If I put the yellow down first and tried to paint a gray background silhouetted tree, man, I'd be here. Well, it's 10 o'clock. See you later. I mean, I tried it, and it had a different effect. So, you guys who paint a lot of landscapes, you recognize that. It's much easier to go from. See how then over this silhouette that I sort of saw and created this shape, the design, the basic, simple value, I didn't even concern myself with any of the halftone stuff I'm doing now. I got a shape that I kind of liked, and then you can just quickly go over it. And you're introducing layers of foliage over the gray or the darker shadowy silhouette. I learned this from studying Parrish and stuff, You know, I mean, look at his stuff, and that's all silhouettes, all shapes, and he worked. I used to try to do his technique, which was oil wash. It was layers. He used linseed oil, and that's beautiful. It's got a lot of great things you can do with it. But I discovered, and he talks about it, he paints all his trees with opaque. He put down a dark silver, like a dark blue or whatever, and it's all opaque. He didn't pick that stuff out of there. If you read it, there's that great book on him. He talked about it was the easiest thing to do. He discovered that it was stippling tiny little bits of detail for the leaves, and he would build from dark to light. So, and I could still, when this is dry, go back, and add another layer on it, make it darker or lighter. There's nothing saying you can't. But you see how easy it is, in a way, and I think from a technical material standpoint, it's easy. It's still up here. I got to know what a tree's all about, or more than that, I've got to know what composition and shape and value is all about. I mean, that's the important part. I've painted enough trees and foliage and looked at enough of them to have a rough idea what they look like, so I can fool you guys into thinking that that's some kind of bush sitting there. But it's just an illusion. It's a big trick I've just played on you, and
well, you're aware of what your tools can do.
Yeah.
You know what they can do. You
Yeah.
know what they'll give you.
Yeah.
You know what you're seeing in your head.
Yeah.
You know how to put that down then in something that represents what you're seeing in your head.
Yeah. And let's just do okay, we're up here now. Let's just do blending this out again. And let's just say we want a real burst of light. It's going to come. And you can start with scrubbing this thing out if you want. And clean this off here. I lost my golden color. I gotta mix it again. Once again, I'm doing this real quickly, but I tend to paint in broken shapes rather than just go. I think.
There's another wonderful element to what you're doing too, and it's called confidence.
Well,
It's more like I go where angels fear to tread, I think.
You told us you've done 800 paintings. So
Yeah.
I think that's where the confidence comes from. How many paintings have you done when you felt like you had some confidence?
Oh, listen, I've had my share of bombs. Believe me. You kidding? I got some stuff I've saved. I don't know why.
Well, you just got to bring them.
I'm saving it for a cold winter night when I need the fuel.
I was going to suggest next time you come out for one of your demos, bring one along and we'll raffle it.
Well, listen. Don't ever think that the best of the best don't have their bad hair days, or whatever. I mean, believe me,
No,
you just
Michael, you could wait until that dries to do that too, couldn't you?
Yeah, I could. Oh, yeah, that's the nice thing about oil
In
paint.
case you feel you're gonna screw it up or something, you can have another shot at it by taking it back out.
See, here I'm just using plain old white. The blending brush, what you do is you learn that instead of mixing colors there, in this case, I'm mixing the color a little bit on the board. Put the white down with the paint that's underneath it. It combines to make a little bit of a halftone. I mean, you get the idea, see? I mean, you could just keep going with this and create a nice soft light effect. Maybe, you know, as I did on the landscape there. And then I would go back and make part of a tree trunk darker.
Did you do that wet in the wet?
I don't remember.
It looks like you did the thing and then he came back afterwards.
I probably did some of that. I might have done some of that. I don't know. All right, we ready to get rid of this?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Thank you.
great job. Wait. Kodak moment.
See?
I can't get too close and.
Put my fingerprint on
Oh, okay.
it. Okay.
Is there more to it?
It belongs to
Thank you for showing us that.
That's,
all the bad breath.
You know, where sign painters buy their brushes, you can also find those big salt brushes. They use,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
they use, they're very expensive.
So, it's gone. And, not totally.
Thomas just got back in.
It could be a part of the.
Oh, he missed it. Well,
We'll show you the video.
Send me a copy.
all right. All right, let me just kind of work on this for a little bit because I want to define a few of these shapes and yeah, we're still going all right with time. Okay.
Are you planning to work more towards the red of the guitar, or you don't know yet?
I'm not sure yet.
Stage?
I think I'm going to introduce a little bit more of this back in here on top of the guitar again.
I'll be working on it. I can go over some things about painting under a painting.
Yeah, that'd be good. And I'll just work here
I
for
think
a
we need to have a little bit. Painting under a painting, brought that up in the class, and I brought it up because a lot of times as illustrators, artists, sometimes we're so consumed with trying to get a likeness or getting something close to the reference we're using that we forget that there could be something going on under that painting that will help give it a little bit more impact than you would get than just painting from the photograph that you're looking at. One of the things I would suggest that you do that would start opening up your mind to start seeing things a little differently is, why don't you try to give yourself assignments that are pretty difficult, but if you start practicing them, you'll start thinking about things in a different way. And when you see what he's doing here, it will make you easier, I think it will make it easier for you to try to produce a painting that has a lot more life to it, because you're not so concerned with trying to do a pretty picture as much as you are having fun and helping to bring things out in a painting that are interesting and not just trying to make things look slick. For an example, have you ever thought about how would you paint a painting of somebody that was insane, but you don't show their eyes? How would you do that? So you want to paint a painting, and you would look at the painting and say something is disturbing about this person. But usually you know that by looking at their eyes. But say you say the eyes had to be closed, or you couldn't see the eyes. How would you do that? So, see, that's a whole different level of thought. But I'm saying if you were able to be aware of that and be able to paint a painting that you could tell something was wrong with them or they were insane, look how much further you would be able to express something in a painting without doing all these brush strokes to try to bring that across. So these are things that you have to be sensitive of to figure out how to do things in a way that would bring about an idea that you're trying to get across without doing it the obvious way that you think it is. You can pick anything. You know, it's like, have you ever tried to illustrate an emotion? What emotion have you illustrated?
Anger.
Well, that's easy.
That's easy, yeah.
Yeah, it's an easy one. Yeah. Try to illustrate.
I had to do envy once.
I can't get
Envy, I had to do envy once.
Envy.
It was hard.
Yeah, that would be hard to do.
Yeah.
What about paranoia? I did an illustration about paranoia.
Wow.
Let's think about that. How would you do an illustration? I'll show you what I did, but how would you do it? Let's get some ideas on how you would do an illustration that would describe paranoia. I wonder if I'm messing up anything by writing.
Not at all.
Anybody got any suggestions? What would you first think about if you were trying to illustrate paranoia?
Something persecuting you, something trying to get you.
Yeah, with eyes rolling back.
Okay, so that's the first thing. So the first thing you got going for you on that one are the eyes. Okay? Now let's think about what is paranoia. What is it?
I'd make the subject small, his environment appear to be big to him.
Okay, but would that be paranoia or would that be somebody with an inferiority complex?
I think paranoid people, they're kind of thinking there's a lot of other people thinking about them. So you,
Sure,
might,
okay.
you might have some figures in the background.
Okay.
Kind of,
That's a good way of thinking about it. Okay, you're talking about, you're bringing out some good ideas, and that's one way that I illustrated it, because that was the first time I ever used an emotion or a sickness to try to demonstrate, try to see if I could illustrate it. What I did was this. I had a face of a man, and just like you said, the eyes. He was looking to the side. He had this disturbing look on his face. He had an afro, by the way. So he was looking, because he was looking, to the side, because you think people, what is paranoia? You think people are watching you.
Yeah.
Okay? Just like you said, people were watching him in the background. What I did was, I had eyes. In his afro, I had three pairs of eyes with different expressions looking at him. Okay? Now, how can you take that and push the idea of paranoia even further? What exactly is paranoia? It's a distorted look or a distorted idea of what you think people think about you, right?
yeah.
Okay, how can you show that?
By distorting things around.
Okay, what is a way that you could get a distortion when you think about something that's distorted? How can you see something that would make something look distorted?
Maybe viewing it through a glass that dims everything.
Perfect idea. And that's exactly what it did. A broken mirror with a crack that went right through it, his head right up there, because it's all in the mind. Anyway, that was the illustration. But the whole point was to think on a different level. And if you can start thinking like that about almost anything, even if it's just something simple, it's like, let's talk about the insane person again. How would you, what certain things could you do to show somebody who was mentally disturbed without showing their eyes? How would you be able to pull that off?
Hands maybe?
Huh?
The hands maybe?
Their whole body gesture.
Posture there.
Okay, that's true. The whole body gesture, the hands. What else can you do?
Well, I guess similar to the idea of the eyes and the hair. I guess you could have like people's mouths or something, like talking around his ears and his head. Like something to symbolize people's mouths talking. Or...
Suppose you wanted to do it in a quiet way. See, this is making you think, isn't it? See?
Yeah.
Maybe you could do something with the way, I'm just giving suggestions, but just to help you see things in a different way. Say somebody's sitting in a chair. Remember, we can't see his eyes, so we can't tell he's insane or not. All right? Maybe you could do something with the gesture. Sitting in the chair, that's pretty simple. But just the way that the hands are grabbing the end of the chair could help you, right? Another thing you could do, say it was a window behind the head, and the way you painted the hair was just real spastic. That will help draw attention to this person's hair is not kept very well. Okay? Another thing you could do, you don't show the eyes, you can have a shadow going across the face or just part of the face so that you only see the nose and the face down from this point. Another thing you could do is the way you paint around the figure, you can have certain textures that are disturbing. The way you paint them in.
Angles, weird angles are always kind of disturbing.
That's very true. That's an idea. Another way that's always perfect with anything that you're doing is the mood that you paint it in, the tones you use to paint it in. But see, if you start thinking this way or approaching a painting this way, what happens is the more you do it, it becomes second nature to you. And you'll be able to bring about or help somebody to understand what you're trying to do with as little work as possible. It won't be the normal things you see. It will be very subtle, but it'll be something that will bother somebody in a way if you want them to be bothered. It'll be something that immediately, as soon as they see it, it'll grab them, they'll do it. They might not know why, but they'll know there's something going on there. That's what I mean by, it's just like what he does when he puts all of that texture on the background. I mean, he's doing it just so he can do something different, and something a little bit more exciting and stuff when he's doing a painting. But still, it's something that he needs to help him to produce the painting to make it more interesting. But what it does is it helps the painting itself. It helps it become more than just an illustration. It puts it on a different level. You know, elegance, it's just like, to give you an example. Best person when you think about elegance, when they do a painting, because it had a lot to do with their design, was, of course, line maker. I mean, it's just the flow of the line, it's the curve of the hand, just the tip, the way the things flow, the way the head would be, or the neck, or anything. Is, if you start sticking that stuff and become aware of that all the way around, you'll be able to get the impact of the emotion you want right away without having to look at how pretty this was done and how pretty that was done, because this stuff is already there. It's underneath the painting. It becomes second nature to you. You'll see it right away without even knowing you're really looking at it. You'll just know you feel it. And that's what I mean by painting under a painting, because if you can ever get to a point where that happens, it'll put your paintings on a whole new level, a whole nother level. And you'll start understanding, and people start seeing things in your paintings that will draw them to them without them knowing why. That's what I mean by painting underneath the painting. It has a lot to do with attitude. It has a lot to do with just being able to get an idea across that is more exciting than having a certain technique or a certain way that you put brush strokes on or something like that. It's a psychological thing. And that's what I mean about stop just trying to paint pretty pictures. Learn how to paint underneath the painting so everything becomes second nature to you. It's just like when you're painting hair. How do you paint hair and make it feel like hair? Is it so much the way that you pull the lines on the hair? Well, yeah, that helps. But what about the outside edges of hair? How do you do that to make that feel like hair? Well, you have to feel it as you paint it. A lot of times when I've done certain paintings, a lot of people wonder, how did you make that fabric feel like fabric? How did you make it feel that softly? And it's just a matter of trying to feel what you're doing before you do it. It's just like when you're painting hair. What is hair? What is hair on the head? Okay, you have these strands that come out of your skull and stuff, and then they make a shape around the air that's around you. But what is hair made up of on your head? It's made up of air. So you have to paint it so it feels like it's got air in it. Soft. I mean, see, that's what I mean. You got to experience what you're doing in a painting. You got to feel it out, got to feel it through. You think about it, it's like when you're painting clouds. You paint clouds the same way. You have to think about them in a way a cloud looks, to feel it through. I mean, there's so many things that you could think about or you could bring up, but it's a way of just getting beneath just the surface of a painting, and it comes through. So, got any questions about it? Fine, but I just thought I'd bring that up because see, a lot of people don't really think about that stuff. They never think about anything other than just doing what they're doing on top of the surface. It brings impact to the painting. So, I just wanted to interject that.
That's just like when I did the Witness or any of those paintings, they have all these strong underpinnings. All those elements represent something.
Mess that up.
Yeah, I mean,
That's much like symbolism.
yeah, it's symbolism, but there are paintings that don't necessarily have to be symbolism, but they still evoke an emotion when you see them. So either way it goes. I mean, one is thinking on a different level as far as a psychological painting. Another one is just learning how to have the paintings breathe with whatever feeling you want to come through the painting. I remember it's like Mark English, when I was working with him, he had done this painting that was of a woman and her child sitting on a sofa. And the painting was so, I don't know, it's weird. It's like when I first looked at it, it was so pretty the way he painted it, and it was so delicate that it was like, when I saw it, it made me hear whispers. You know, there was nothing he did. It was just his painting. It was just pretty and it was just soft, but that's the way it affected me. It was just so delicate the way he had the pillow and real fluffy, and the clothing was, you could tell the fabric was real soft, and the way he painted the faces, there was a quietness, a quiet beauty about the painting. And it's like, why should a painting affect a person that way? The point is, it can. You know, and trying to be able to get stuff like that in it. You know, of course, Michael does a lot of quiet beauty paintings. You know, paintings that are still. They're still paintings, but they're very peaceful. You know, something about them. How does he do that? I mean, why should, as flat as his technique can be sometimes, why should that bring that out in you? You know, because he knows enough about his painting and what to do that he knows how to paint underneath the painting. So.
Amen, brother.
Something to think about.
I like it. Tom and I, this is like the tag team deal. Hey, whack, now we got this tag team going on. Whew. Do you want to just run out and hit the, feel free to come in and out. I'm just going to keep working here for a few minutes, and then I'll start talking a little bit more about what I'm doing. I might try to get to this hand. And by doing that, maybe I'll avoid then having to do a head. And I'll talk about this head a little bit.
Did I miss a picture moment?
No. Well, I don't know. It looks like he's still kind of resolving nebulous areas.
sleeping, I'm working hours are
Have you?
I'm zoning out.
Have to work all day. 10 hours a day. Short day for you.
That's right, because I had to knock off her last night.
What's that?
Subdued colors with the oil.
Yeah, well, it depends on the way you mix
You're
them.
gonna get older, you'll have to cut
You
back.
know,
to 14
oil
hours a
paints
day.
can be just whammo, you know, if you want to make them that way.
Won't be able to go through.
At this
it.
stage, I'm not too concerned about,
Don't care. They
this
just
is as
wanna
bright
learn
as I've gotten, and I
something
just did that as
different.
far as the demonstration. I'm just bringing the painting to a certain
You
point
should
here.
have brought your work in here
That,
and had a demo on that.
You know, I mean, all told, I probably have not even 3 hours in this. So so if you're working at this, you know, I'm not trying to noodle with it yet. I'm just establishing some basic values and shapes, roughing this in quickly. And I might like it, you know, I'm doing it in such a fashion. I'm also trying to think that even though I'm doing it roughly, like with these strokes and stuff, I'm making them, I like them. You know, I'm not just like, they're not so random that they don't have a purpose. And they could maybe stand by themselves. When I'm done with this at this stage, in some respects, I could stand back and like it. What I'm trying to do here is get this to a point where I want to see if I can demonstrate a little bit that color concept we were talking about, of doing a painting does not have an enormous amount of paint. I mean, of color. I'm still learning about color, very much so. I mean, it's a scary thought to me, and I tend to retreat and use simple combinations of warm and cool because what I want to do with my own work is eventually work toward doing enough subtle stuff in dark areas that there's a lot of richness and stuff going on, but it gives you the illusion of it still being somewhat similar. You know, I'm not. The colors aren't so disruptive that it breaks up the shape of the painting. Great painters will do that. It won't just be a green area. It'll be 4 or 5 colors in there that'll give you the illusion of a green, and it's a much richer green, you know.
Yeah.
And what I want to do as I work is learn to go back over the top and quickly do that without destroying the spontaneity of the painting. But I want to learn how to do that, and that's something that I want to work toward. Now what I'm doing right now is I'm roughing out the sleeves and leaving some of this tone in here for some of the shadows. And I want to go back to decide if the white I'm putting in here is too white.
Could I have the keys, please?
Yeah.
Daddy, please.
Drive safe, son.
You got a good
Hey, you got a 10 o'clock curfew.
Well, you're a couple of years senior to him anyway. So.
Like when you did her face, did you go in with the green, the same green palette or anything like that, and then pick the highlights out?
Yeah, sort of. I did a little bit like I did down here, you know. And although I haven't gone back, what I did is I sort of scrubbed it out and brushed it and got it to a point, you know, where I liked it. Now the only reason I love the green is at this point is because that's kind of the reflective light. Yeah, you know. And I had said to them if I wanted to make this whole area like I sometimes do, like let's say an illustration, like that guy over there. You can make the shadow area and everything like more of a monochromatic golden aura. You could do that as well, or like in here. I could have left the shadow areas this color, or a variation of this light gray green, but in this case I wanted to take, from a design standpoint, I wanted this whole shape to all be gold and yellow. Okay, rather than break this shape up with cool shadow areas, which I could have done. It was just a decision I made. And I ended up sort of liking the layout, you know. You know, maybe this painting needed an area here that would be warm, and I did a little bit of it, fooled around to add some color in here. I could have done that. I could have scrubbed this out as a light green, gray area in the shadow areas. I mean, that's an arbitrary decision. But for the story, these were all 6 guardian angels that were glowing, that stood out from the background. So, you know, those are decisions you can kind of make. Now, I could right now, I could go back in here. And I'm not really done with this face. I know I'll work on it some more before the painting's done, but if I wanted to, I could scrub a secondary light maybe on this edge, like I started to do with the ear, you know, warm it up. You know, I could take a soft. Let me show you something I can do with this white that's nice about oil paint. Let's say the white on her shirt is too white. I'm not saying it is, but this is This is dry, and you can mix a very thin. A thin glaze, like you can with any paints, but with oil paint it's nice too. And let's say I want to make that a bluer shirt. I'm just going to take a little bit of a clear ultramarine. There's no white in this at all.
So you use a lot of that medium and with.
Well, I do, yeah, I sometimes do. I've kind of gotten used to it because I have to have it dry. And sometimes if it gets too buttery, I told you could take your oil paint, mix it up, and you can put it on a piece of cardboard or a piece of paper, push it around for a little while with a palette knife, and a lot of the oil soaks out of it. And it gets chalkier, it's stiffer, but yet it's still got the drying medium and stuff in it. And so then you paint with that, and you get a drier, heavier, plastery kind of feel to it. You know what I mean?
You put the liquid on the piece of paper, is that what you're saying?
No, you'd mix a pile of stuff, pile of paint, thick paint, and you could take a palette knife and take, I'm talking like a pile of this stuff.
Right.
And you stick it on a piece of porous cardboard or something, and you put it like the illustration board looks good on the back side or something. You just shove it around a little while. You'll see a lot of the oil starts to soak into the paper. It comes out of the paint. And it gives you it's kind of a nice effect to get a, what it does for me is it enables me to have a thicker, chalkier kind of a feeling with paint, but it's going to dry pretty quick for you. You know?
Better for scum like that.
Yeah, you know. And then you can go. So what I've got here now, see just a clear wash of blue. You know, and I can just.
So you're glazing over.
I'm just. This is like one form of glazing. I'll just put it over this whole. This whole shirt area. You know, and it's real quick. You know, I don't have to go back and mix in a fake blue. I just quickly. You know, so now the shirt stands out wide. Before it stood out here wide because of the value of it, right? Because it kicked you in the butt with its whiteness. There wasn't much color, there was white. Now it stands out because of the color. You know, so it's my choice. You know, what do I like better?
White.
No.
You know, maybe I'll rub it out and we'll compromise.
It's art by committee.
A little bit of blue, but it's.
Can we all like vote?
I can't really make that decision yet in the painting, and I don't have to, which is great.
Right.
This is where you, as an artist, you got to be careful, and I see with a lot of students is, or you establish some of these other things that are more important up in a lot of that junk, and you already start to say, well, gee, you know, there's a blue shirt, I better make it blue, and these dots up here are red berries, and then there's this little green in here, I better make that green. Oh, you know, and then there's it, and pretty soon you got 15 or 20 colors on your painting, and you're halfway done, and you wonder why you created kind of a mess. You've lost the simple continuity. You can always go back and add it later, you know. And I'm not concerned. That's a hard point to get to because if you're like me, I was in a lot of ways still am insecure about the work, and I used to want to hurry up and get it done and see what it was going to look like because I was afraid. I don't know. You know, I just had this nervousness about making those decisions right away, and it took me a long time to relax and just don't worry about it. You know, the plan I had tonight was to bring it maybe to a certain point if I can, sort of block in some of the rest of these basic values, and then I can go catch my breath and come back and take it to the next step. What I'm going to try to do with this, if I finish it, I think I probably will, is send a 4x5 back to the school.
Oh, really?
You know, so you'll have an example, maybe at least a transparency to see where I ended up.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll try to do that. This isn't going to be paint. We're not going to make a print out of it or anything. If I get it to the point where I feel I like it, you know, and I may at some point just cut the shape of the painting to focus more on her. I'm not sure, but if I get it to that point, it'll be more like a gallery type piece. It's not going to be a. You know, and if I really like it, I can throw it in my portfolio. You know, but it's. You know, I attempted to bring this here because I think it has possibilities ultimately for it to be kind of a nice, interesting portrait. And I may at this point, I have a feeling with this one, I'm going to go back and continue to really add some heavier paint to this because I want to try that. I want to go back. And even if it's just thicker opaque paint mimicking some of the lighter, some of the washier stuff that's under here, I think I'm going to go do that because it's something I've been experimenting with, And
Yeah, the things that you're doing by wiping out and putting it back over, that may suggest a color that you want to eventually mix up and start to work with, right?
yeah. So what I'm gonna do is paint out some of the highlights on these sleeves real quick. And I occasionally will take a painting where I'll do more working light to dark, then I just draw. And that's a good exercise too. And I try to find a compromise between those two things. And by that I mean, I just ran out of turpentine, it just disappeared. I don't have any more here, but you think they got any, Thomas? What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to rough in some more of the highlights on the sleeves, and I've introduced just a little bit of a green and some blue, and I'm just trying a different color that'll peek through the shadows, these very subtle shadow areas that are on the sleeve. We were talking about in the illustration class, as a designer and illustrator, I could take these and almost make them just pure flat white shapes, like some illustrators do. And the painting really wouldn't affect it that much. But it's not really the style that I tend to work in, so, but you could. You see how up here, you can tell those are arms just with just a hint of a dot or something. They're almost like cutout shapes of paper if I wanted to do that. If I wanted to paint in that style, I could do that. But as I said, I'm not going to do that. I want to leave some brush strokes and a subtle hint of the the folds in the sleeve and stuff like that. So here now, this is not a nice thing. Sometimes I'll look at the Xerox and maybe that looks better. I'll decide if I want to sort of go by this or if I really want to look at the greater detail, the reality of the shirt. You understand the difference there? That's just a decision I make. And I'll do it quickly, and I'm not really quite sure. So let's just see. I think well, let's see. This is also something else I do once in a while. I just thought of this as well. I can actually just use this.
What areas do you feel insecure about? You said you're insecure. What areas do you feel
well,
is that coloring?
Yeah, it's color mostly. It's sometimes brushwork. It's making some overall kinds of decisions. Did I say, is that just being too tacky? Like here's an example.
Wow, you just
Is that too weird, or do I like it, or do I?
Arm.
You just added
Should I leave this like whoa?
You just added a whole new dimension to that.
Yeah. I won't call it insecurity, but I call it like, well.
Are you being too cute or something?
Yeah, am I being just too?
But you did it in the girl sitting in the shade.
Yeah, and a lot of people like that. So I'll change this to I'll just make it a bit more subtle. No, let's just leave it for the time being.
It's because he can.
I did it because I can. Here I'm pretty much just using pure white. And I'm going to kind of stay with a white shirt. And later on I may just tone the thing down. So, change this just a little bit. I mean, you got to have fun with this. For me, if I don't have fun with this stuff, why am I here? or why do I keep? And I've really discovered, going back to discovering the joy of painting like this. I tell you, a few years ago, I felt so bound up with tightness and deadlines and just the old way I was working. And I'm just at that point where I just felt I'd lost a lot of my experimental ingenuity and the spontaneity of the work. And I've discovered for me to go back to more of an impasto painting type style, now that I've learned a lot about composition, color, value, shapes, and all that, I couldn't have done this kind of work 10, 15 years ago, really. I don't feel. I mean, it was there, and there were the indications that were there, but it was more of a labored. I didn't have the guts to just to do some of the things I'm doing. You're talking about confidence, and I think that's, it's just something you sort of learn. I mean, if I sat down in front of a computer and had to do it in Fractal Painter, I mean, I wouldn't have the confidence in a way. I mean, so it just comes from repetition and it's like when I talked to Thomas about it, he and I talk about this stuff, and he knows how to do this in a way. I mean, there's no question about it. It's just that he also feels that, why have I blocked myself into the way I do things? I mean, he does great work, and the thought behind it blows my mind. I love his stuff, and we feed off of each other. I learn things from him, and you're never too old. Or never too good, but no question about it.
I did hear everybody at the lecture kind of cringe on this, how long it took you guys.
Exactly.
Oh, this was 3 hours.
Well,
this was a day. Everybody just squirmed. Do you think, do you find yourself painting differently, faster, slower when you paint for yourself than if you're on a project with or without?
Well, yeah, I mean, because generally people are hiring me for a look. They're hiring me for a particular point of view, or I can't get too crazy on them. And I wouldn't. I mean, it's just, I'm not even all that crazy with myself yet, but I... it's a fine balance, and then you get down to style. Then you're getting into as an illustrator. Well, I find as an illustrator you're much more aware of a style. I am anyway. And there are a lot of great painters out there. There's a lot of there's guys in this class who are doing stuff that blow my mind. I mean, look at this guy's stuff. But they're hiring him for a style that I could just never do. That's just. And so I find as an illustrator, I become much more aware of technique and style, because that's what they're going to hire you for. And does that make sense? I don't know if it makes sense, what I just said. But, and as for my easel painting, I'm not really quite sure. I'm just trying to let some of the spontaneity and some of the fun we're talking about, some of the accidents, some of the... This kind of painting, I prefer to, and I haven't done a lot of it, and that's the truth. I'm slowly working toward trying to do more of it. I do work quickly, and then I'll go stand back and figure out, I'm not thinking a whole lot right here. I mean, I'm not making super major decisions.
Michael, is there any other medium that comes close to oil? I mean, like acrylics or
Well,
gouache that you could actually use?
I think acrylics, you can work like this. I don't see any reason why not. The only thing you can't do very easily is this soft blending. You can't blend into unless you use